Let's get this contender series on and popping. We talked about it yesterday. Our tier 1 contenders in the college football landscape are Ohio State and Georgia. There's no way around it. Those are the two teams that I think from a roster level, from a coaching staff level, I feel the best about, even with the exit of Tony Alford. So with that being said, you got tier 1 over here. Well, that means there's other tiers. Who's the tier 2 teams when it comes to the national championship contention? Got a couple of them here. This is a much wider field than we talked about yesterday, obviously with 2 teams yesterday. Let's define what a tier 2 contender is. Tier 2 is essentially like you would not be surprised in the slightest if they won it all. This is not your dark horse. This is not your sleeper. These are teams that you feel pretty good about going into the year being in that 10-win range. Now, with that feeling that, hey, I like who they have on that roster, maybe you like their staff, we'll talk about those more in a minute, you still have a little bit of hesitancy. There's still some unknowns about them. So we'll talk about them right now. First team we got to talk about here is your former, well, not, is former the right word? Big 12 champion, as we know it, the Texas Longhorns. They're still roped in for that climb, man. They're still roped in for that climb. Yes, you lost some key pieces, but even with that being said, you have yourself fully stable and harnessed in with Steve Sarkisian running the show and Quinn Ewers as your quarterback. In my opinion, the most important piece as a part of your football organization, Texas still has intact. On top of that, they have a championship culture. How long did we talk about Texas and not having the right pieces culturally and not having the right things they were caring about and how they had to lock in and be all about Texas football? That, I truly believe, was put to bed a season ago. They have now arrived. We're not doing the whole Texas is back, they're not back. Texas has arrived in the Steve Sarkisian era. Quinn Ewers has weapons too. Yes, you lose Xavier Worthy. Yes, you lost Adonai Mitchell. But those weapons, man, Silas Bolden from Oregon State, he's a Swiss Army knife that I think a lot of folks are going to learn about nationally this upcoming season. A lot of people probably didn't see him play last year because he was at Oregon State and their games were on at like 10 Eastern. Rest in peace, Pac-12 After Dark. We love you. We miss you. Isaiah Bond, staying in the SEC. He was at Alabama last year. A guy that I think has more juice than what we even saw last year by nature of how Alabama's offense operated. It was very much so a Jalen Milroe run the football kind of offense. I think with Quinn Ewers dealing the rock for him, he's going to have a big year. Amari Niblack, tight end that flashed at times for Alabama last year as well. He's now in Austin. Stable of backs too. So offensively, you got all the ingredients you need to be successful. Now with that being said, as long as you have the ingredients for Steve Sarkisian, he's proven, man, he is one of the best chefs offensively in college football. So you give him what he needs, he's going to cook. The question marks, though, are obvious. You lose 1,800 yards receiving between Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell. I love Moneyball. I love the way that they were able to aggregate the replacing of those players in Jason Giambi and Matt Damon. No, Johnny Damon, not Matt Damon. He's an actor. You hear what I'm saying? I think that 1,800 yards receiving is going to be a little bit more difficult to replace than maybe we're anticipating right now. Also, they lost not one but 2 All-Americans in the middle of that defensive line with Big Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. So as they move into the SEC, it's not ideal to lose those pieces, but still, all that being said, if you're putting your faith somewhere as a Texas Longhorn fan, it's in Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkisian to be able to keep things stable and keep things operating at the level that you hope they would be as you head into the SEC. This next team, man, we are very transparently extremely high on. We love the way they're trending, and that is the Oregon Ducks. Oregon, to me, feels a lot like how Thanos talked about himself in The Avengers. And Nick Brake, big movie guy. He doesn't love Marvel, but we're going to talk about it anyway. They are inevitable. That's the way that it feels to me. Oregon, I believe, is inevitable. And in 2024, they have a 6-year quarterback in Dylan Gabriel who has been successful everywhere he's been. UCF, Oklahoma, doesn't matter. Dude just balls out. They got an offense that's going to play to his skill set with Willie Stein running the show. And they got multiple playmakers for him to get the football to. Most notably, Tez Johnson, 1,000-yard receiver a year ago. Stick of dynamite, and then Evan Stewart, who I think has a very real case to be the best offensive player in the transfer portal over from Texas A&M. So they got a lot of pieces offensively, but then the key part of this, and we've said it for a while, they have the price of admission on the line of scrimmage. Defensively, 330, 300, 270 at that jack position, and 290. That's their weights. Okay, they're going to be more than fine to be physical enough on that side of the football at that position group. In the Big Ten now, we know it's a line of scrimmage league. Oregon has more than enough of what they need on that line of scrimmage. The questions, though, are obvious. Are they able to have enough defensively, especially on that back end, if they run into the equivalent of a Michael Penix Jr. from last year? Because that was the thing. They were trying to be complex. They were trying to heat him up. And Michael Penix Jr. was just back there playing darts, man. Like he was just carving them up like it was Halloween. I really, really love the way that they've attacked the portal. But even with that being said, you still have to have those transfers mesh for you. Does Evan Stewart mesh seamlessly into this offense? I'm curious to see. So Oregon, without question to me, is a contender. Put them in that tier 2 range because of the fact that they have some new pieces and because of what we saw them lack on the back end defensively last year. But Dan Lanning, man, I'll tell you what, stock is going one way. If you can get it at a reasonable price, buy that Oregon Duck stock because it's headed one direction. Alabama, they lost a lot. Yeah, they did. There's no way around it. They're 115th in the country in returning production. But this Alabama team that played in the college football playoff last year and won the SEC last year, they were 125th in returning production the year before. So if we're doing the math here, Alabama actually has more returning production this upcoming season than they had a year ago. The obvious part, Nick Saban no longer running the show. Can't overlook that. But you still have one of the best coaches in college football, right? Like Kalen DeBoer is 104-12 as a head coach. That's not an accident. He hasn't lucked his way into that kind of winning record. I think you put Alabama in the tier 2 contender space until you can't, until they show you, quite frankly, until they're blatant and saying, hey, listen, we're not the same Alabama we used to be. My question marks, though, is Jalen Milroe able to be what he was against LSU last year consistently? Because there were times last year where Jalen Milroe was the best player on the field. Not all the time, but there were times where you saw that from him. Obviously, it's a new offense. Are they going to cater to his skill set, or are they going to ask Jalen Milroe to be what Michael Penix Jr. was at Washington? Because if it's the latter, it could be a bumpy acclimation period for everyone in Tuscaloosa. The obvious part of this, too, like, yeah, you replace a lot. I just talked about the production that they don't have coming back, but they have 33% production returning on the defensive side of the football. It's hard to make that up right away. They have a lot of production they have a lot of talent that's unproven. I don't think it's necessarily a case where you just have a bunch of 2 and 3 stars in the wings for you, but still, there's going to be a little bit of a wait and see here when you talk about Alabama. Let's stay in the SEC. I think LSU is a tier 2 national title contender. And we'll talk about our question marks in a second. But as we sit here in March, man, I trust who's driving that bus, baby. And that is one Brian Kelly. He told us here on this very show, yeah, year 3 for me is pretty good. Yeah, year 3, I tend to like year 3. We usually have a pretty good amount of success in year 3. He wasn't trying to make headlines. He was just being real. And you look at his track record, he's keeping it a buck. Year 3 at Cincy, 12-0. Year 3 at Notre Dame, national title appearance. Year 3 at LSU, is that a national championship? I don't know, but I really like this roster. I think the defense last year massively underperformed. And that's encouraging if you're an LSU fan because you say, yeah, of course that you underperformed. But no. It wasn't like you underperformed in the sense of what your standard is. I think you underperformed in relation to your roster talent. Blake Baker coming over from Missouri. They're going to heat you up. They're going to get after you. Put Harold Perkins hopefully in position to be successful and do Harold Perkins things, which is absolutely maul the quarterback and let him be aggressive. I think that's going to bode well. If the defense is even slightly better from a year ago and the offense is in a similar tier as it was a year ago, LSU could win the SEC. And I don't think we talk about that enough. Now, a big part of the offense staying where it was a year ago is the gumbo gunslinger, Garrett Nussmeier. Is he able to continue what he did in the bowl game into next season? Remains to be seen. But Brian Kelly told us on this show, man, he's like, everything you've seen from Garrett Nussmeier has been in limited action. It has been with him taking mostly practice reps with our second team. So Garrett Nussmeier has been nowhere near his ceiling. So I'm excited to see what he looks like. The defensive question marks are fair and they're obvious, but if you're trusting the person who's running the operation and we're trusting Brian Kelly's trend at his different stops over the course of his last couple of jobs he's had, year 3 could be a big year for LSU. Last team to get to here, it is the Michigan Wolverines. There's an Elton John song called I'm Still Standing. I'm not going to sing it because I don't want us to get copyright strikes, but here's the deal, man. Michigan is still standing. Yes, they're 128th in returning production out of 134 teams. That is not a good thing, but you cannot overlook the fact that what they had in-house last year was a lot of key developmental guys. And I think a lot of those guys that didn't contribute how they want to last year still got developed and are primed to do some really good things in 2024. Also, the pieces that are back that did contribute, massive. Colston Loveland, Donovan Edwards, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson. We talk about it a lot on this show. They have a lot of key pieces that I don't know are reflected necessarily in returning production. The question marks are fair and they're obvious. Like new head coach, Sharon Moore. He's 3-0 as a head coach. If you want to talk about him being 2-0 against Ohio State with the hiring of Tony Alford, be my guest. New defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale. How does that look? New quarterback. I expect it to be Alex Orji taking reps with the ones during spring practice. We'll see what happens there. I wouldn't be surprised if they went and got a transfer portal quarterback. Again, we'll see how that whole thing formulates, but there is a lot still in-house at Michigan to be excited about and to hang your hat on. You can't talk about tier 2 contenders for the national championship and not talk about the team that just won the whole darn thing a year ago. That feels disrespectful. That feels irresponsible. Two things of which we try not to be on this show. So our tier 2 contenders are as follows. Texas, Oregon, Bama, LSU, and the national champions looking to repeat, Michigan Wolverines. Let me know who y'all would put in that tier 2 range, though. It's that part of the year where we got to kind of take a look at things and take a look at the landscape, and I think that is the teams that would not surprise me if they won the national championship, but teams that as we sit here in March, we have a healthy amount of question marks to where we're going to put them at that second rung of national title contenders. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.